Let's look at positioning your company for success and how important that really is. You know, as Wayne Vos in Profits Unlimited, I'd love to be stuck in the middle with you because, today we talked a little bit about it on a carpool with Darren. We were like, if you could go back in time, what would you change? Or not what would you change, but what would you tell people? What would you tell your family or friends or whatever? And that's kind of what provided the impetus for this today about, you know, getting stuck in the middle because there's a lot of clowns on the left and jokers on the right, but here you are in the middle. And we're trying to look a lot of times for help to help our company be more successful, more profitable. But where is that information coming from? Is it coming from clowns on the left and jokers on the right? Because a lot of times when we look at social media, and I'm not throwing social media under the bus, but it's just the reality of it. There's a lot of good information that you can get on social media, but there's a lot of clowns and jokers out there as well. I like sitting back sometimes and just watching some of the conversations that take place on some of those different platforms. And it's like, and I'm sure you've done it yourself. You see it and you're like, man, that's the dumbest thing in the world. Not too long ago, I was watching a conversation go by where they were talking about, what are we going to do about ice melters, man? The wind chill is going to be 5 below zero. And 27 people are commenting. I'm just made that number up. But you got all these comments. We'll switch to magnesium chloride, switch to calcium chloride, switch to this, switch to that. Try this, try that. Okay, first of all, if you're doing snow and ice management, do yourself a favor and understand that wind chill has no effect on the type of ice melter you're going to use. Wind chill affects people and animals, okay? But the concrete's going to be the ambient temperature outside. The rails, the steps, the asphalt. Wind chill doesn't affect things like that. You don't have to believe me. Look it up on Google. There's about a 3-sentence explanation that explains that, things don't get any colder than the ambient temperature. So it's important that we know little things and don't count on the clowns and the jokers that are out there. Because what I've found is too many times we just don't know what we don't know. It really boils down to this simply. Have you picked the lane that you're going to run your company in that's going to position your company to be successful? Have you picked the lane for your company? And is it the right lane for you to be in? That's probably the better question. We go out and we do things a lot of times just because that's how everybody else is doing it. But just because everybody else is doing something a certain way doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way to do it. Track at a high school or college, a running track. Okay? You got the inside, I don't know how many lanes are going across there. Say there's 7 lanes. You got the inside lane, you got the other lanes, you got the outside lane. Picture yourself standing on one of those lanes and running, and that's you running your business. How did you pick that lane that you're going to run into? That's the question. Did you pick the middle because that's where everybody else is at? Or did you pick the inside? Did you pick the outside? Doesn't matter how you picked it, but have you picked the lane that you're going to run your company in? And have you picked the lane and stayed in that lane? Because human nature, a lot of times, man, you know it and I know it, we don't want to deviate. It's like, okay, it's working okay, but it's not working great. but we're making it. Are you going to be happy to run your business within that mediocrity? That's another question you got to ask yourself. Are you happy with where you're at? Are you complacent with where you're at in your company? I think that's something else we got to think about. Don't get complacent with where you're at, because it's easy to do when we haven't identified who we are, what our goals are, where we want our company to go, and most importantly, how are we going to get there? It's easy to figure out and pick a lane. The challenging aspect of that sometimes is, how are we going to get there? Why do we get hung up that way of trying to switch lanes all the time? Now you're saying, Wayne, you're kind of backtracking on what you said earlier. A minute ago you said pick a lane. Now you're saying, hey, sometimes we need to switch a lane. Absolutely, you might need to switch a lane. But how do we know when it's time to change the lane is what's important with your business. Have you ever asked anybody to evaluate you and your company? And I don't mean evaluate it from a financial standpoint. Care less about that right now. We're not talking about that. But have you asked anybody to look at your company and say, hey, what do you like about us? Have you asked your clients that? What do you like about us? More importantly, what do you not like about us? What would you like us to do that we don't do? Because that's where you're going to get some honest feedback. Because when you're the only one looking in at it, we've always heard that, hey, sometimes you're your own worst enemy, right? Because we critique sometimes too hard ourselves. But sometimes, and even a lot of times, what I run into is we really don't ask ourselves the right questions when we need to critique our companies. So that's why we need to get some outside influence from your clients. Ask your friends. If you got a really good friend, ask them what they see about your company that you could do different or better. Or your spouse. I know there's been times that Jane, my wife, she's given me pretty solid advice. But, I thought, man, that won't work, or I can't do that. But there's things that I ended up saying, you know what? She's right about that. She don't know much about the business side of the internal business side of Wayne's Lawn Service. So she can give a better opinion of what maybe we could do different and better in a certain area, if that makes sense. You might be saying, well, why doesn't she know something about your business? Well, she knows plenty about what we do and how we do it and all that. But an outsider's influence, even though it may be a spouse or a friend, you might get some pretty good answers. And who else can you ask? That's the big question too. I say you can ask your competitor. Somebody that you respect as a competitor. Kind of like that song Stuck in the Middle, right? There's a lot of competitors out there, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but by God, it's going to sound like it, that are jokers and clowns. But there's a lot of your competitors out there that you can get some really solid knowledge from that'll help your company. But the first thing you got to do is ask.